I'm 28, and after my divorce ripped my life in half, I packed what was left of it into my truck and drove to a small town called Chatham, Alabama. I didn't have many options, no savings worth mentioning, no friends with spare couches, so I ended up in my grandfather's old house. He'd passed a few years back and left the place to our family. It sits about 10 minutes outside town on 10 acres of land, swallowed on all sides by thick Alabama woods. Out there, the silence isn't just quiet, it's heavy. At first, I told myself that was exactly what I needed. Space, stillness, a reset. The house itself feels older than it looks. The wood floors creak like they're clearing their throats before every step. The doors swell and stick in their frames. No matter how high I crank the thermostat, there's always a chill in the air, like the walls are holding on to winters from decades ago. Still, it was free, and free was good enough for me. The first few nights passed without incident. I unpacked boxes, scrubbed down cabinets, tried to make the place feel lived in again. In the evenings, I'd sit on the porch with a beer, listening to the wind drag through the trees and the occasional owl calling from somewhere deep in the dark. No traffic, no neighbors, just peace. Then the noises started. The first time I heard it was on the 7th night. I remember because I'd just begun to relax, thinking maybe this place could really work. It was close to midnight when I crawled into bed. I was drifting off when a sound slipped through the open window, a whistle. Not a tune I recognized, just a slow, uneven melody, broken and off key, like someone half remembering a song. It was faint at first, moving through the woods behind the house. It sounded like footsteps crunching lightly through brush, paired with that whistling. My skin prickled, but I told myself it was probably a hunter cutting through the property, or maybe some drunk neighbor wandering home. The next night, it came back. Same time, same off-key tune. But closer, this time I sat straight up in bed. I flipped on the porch light and stared out the window. Nothing. Just trees swaying in the dark. I grabbed a flashlight and stepped outside, barefoot on the cold wooden boards. The beam cut across the yard, over the fence line, into the tree line. No movement. No snapped twigs. No retreating footsteps. Just that whistle, drifting farther back into the woods, as if whoever made it knew exactly how far to stay out of sight. I tried to ignore it after that. For a few nights, I stayed in bed and forced my eyes shut, pretending I couldn't hear it. But it always started around 17 a.m. I know that sounds too specific to be real, but I check my phone every time. Once in 15, once in 19. Always somewhere right there, never earlier, never later. Like someone had set an alarm. That's when the paranoia crept in. I started wondering if someone knew I was living alone out there. Someone watching, waiting until the house went dark before making their presence known. The isolation that once felt peaceful began to feel like a trap. After a few more nights, I called the sheriff's office. An older deputy, I'll call him Deputy H, came out to take a look. He had the kind of face that's seen too much and doesn't bother pretending otherwise. I explained everything, the timing, the tune, how it moved through the woods. The longer I talked, the quieter he got. When I finished, he stood there for a moment, eyes fixed on the tree line. Then he said, word for word, your granddaddy used to call us about the same thing. Said someone was whistling around the property late at night. Always in the spring. We never found anything. Figured he was just getting old. He looked back at me. But now you're hearing it too. That's when the house stopped feeling like a fresh start and started feeling like something I'd inherited without knowing the full cost. I had no idea my grandfather had been living with this. When Deputy H told me, something inside me shifted. It wasn't just my problem anymore, it was a pattern. He told me to keep the doors locked and stay inside after dark. I almost laughed, as if I'd been taking midnight strolls. Still, I started treating the house like a bunker. I double-checked every window before bed. I installed new locks. One night, half embarrassed by my own fear, I shoved chairs under the doorknobs like would stop someone determined enough to whistle their way through the woods at Wetty. 17 in the morning. But the whistling kept coming, and it was getting closer. One night, it sounded like it was right behind the shed. Not drifting through the trees, right there. The tune was louder, clearer, almost confident, like whoever it was knew I could hear them. I grabbed my flashlight and peeked through the blinds, trying to keep my breathing quiet. The yard looked empty. The trees barely moved, but the sound lingered, hovering just beyond what I could see. I didn't dare step outside. The next night, it came from the front porch, right by the door. 3 long, slow whistles. Then silence, not fading into the woods, not retreating, just stopping like whoever made it was standing inches from the other side of the door, listening. The night after that is the one that broke me. The whistling didn't come from outside at all. It came from beneath me, from under the floorboards. I swear on everything, it sounded like someone was in the crawl space, whistling up through the vents. The sound traveled through the house, thin and warped. Like it was breathing through the foundation. I didn't sleep. I sat upright in bed until sunrise. Every nerve in my body lit up. The next morning, I climbed into the attic and started digging through whatever my grandfather had left behind. If he'd dealt with this for years, there had to be something. I found a dusty box shoved behind an old trunk. Inside were his journals, dozens of entries, and page after page mentioned the whistling every spring for over 10 years. He never saw who it was, but he was certain someone was watching the house. He wrote about sitting by the front door with a rifle across his knees, waiting. He said it only ever happened after my grandmother died, when he was alone. That detail stuck with me. Alone. Like it only chose houses with one heartbeat inside. I called Deputy H again. He came out, sat at my kitchen table, and read the journals slowly. The more he read, the tighter his jaw got. When he finished, he didn't joke or shrug it off this time. He just told me to be careful. "Don't open the door if you don't know who it is," he said. His voice didn't sound steady. That night, I didn't even pretend I was going to sleep. I sat on the couch with a shotgun across my lap, one I barely knew how to load properly. My palms were sweating so bad I kept wiping them on my jeans. I watched the clock. 1:16 a.m. 17. The whistling started, but it didn't come from outside. It came from the hallway. Inside the house, every muscle in my body locked. The hallway light was off, just a stretch of black leading toward the bedrooms. The whistling was soft at first, then clearer, moving closer, not rushed, slow, measured, like footsteps timed to that broken melody. I stood up, hands shaking, raised the shotgun, and shouted, "Who's there?" The whistling stopped instantly, dead silence. I reached over and flipped on the hallway light. Nothing. The hallway was empty. Doors closed. No movement. No shadows slipping away. Just the hum of the house settling. I didn't sleep after that. Couldn't. I sat there until morning, replaying it over and over in my head. It had been inside. There's no way I imagined the direction of that sound. I don't believe in hallucinations that detailed. And I don't believe in ghosts. This was a person. A real one. 2 nights have passed since then. No whistling. No footsteps. No movement in the woods. The silence is back, but it doesn't feel peaceful anymore. It feels like the pause between knocks on a door. And I don't know if that's better or worse. I convinced myself it might finally be over. 2 quiet nights had passed, and the silence almost felt merciful. On the 3rd night, I went to bed just after midnight. I didn't sit up with the shotgun this time. I didn't pace the floors. I just left the hallway light on and told myself I needed sleep more than I needed fear. At exactly 13:17 a.m., I woke up, but it wasn't to whistling, it was knocking slow. Deliberate, 3 knocks, evenly spaced. They were coming from inside the house, from the back door. Then silence. I didn't move. I lay there in the dark, staring at the ceiling, counting my breaths. My ears strained so hard they hurt. About a minute later, I heard it, a soft creak from the hallway floorboard. Then another. The distinct sound of weight shifting on old wood. Someone was walking in my house, and then the hallway light went out. Total darkness. I grabbed the shotgun, my hands slick with sweat, and stepped into the doorway of my bedroom. My heart was pounding so hard I could feel it in my throat. The hallway stretched ahead of me, black and narrow. At the far end, I saw a figure, a person dressed in black, pale face catching just enough light from the window to stand out. They weren't moving, just standing there, watching me. I raised the shotgun, but my arms trembled so badly the barrel wavered. My mouth felt like sandpaper. I tried to speak and barely managed air. Finally, I forced it out. "Don't move." My voice cracked. The figure tilted slightly, and in the dim light, I saw them begin to shift their weight, lifting one leg slowly, turning their body like they were about to run. "Stop!" I shouted. In that instant, they bolted. They darted out of the hallway and out of my sight so fast it barely felt real. I heard heavy footsteps, heavier than I expected, pounding across the floor. The front door slammed open. I ran after them, adrenaline overriding fear. I burst outside and fired a shot straight into the darkness ahead, not into the air, but low and forward. If I'm being honest, part of me hoped I'd hit them. "Don't come back," I screamed into the trees. The blast echoed violently off the house and deck, ringing in my ears. The woods swallowed everything again. I locked the house up as fast as I could, jumped into my truck, and drove into town without looking back. I slept in the driver's seat in a grocery store parking lot, shotgun across my lap, watching every shadow. The next morning, Deputy H met me at the property. The front door was unlocked. That's when it became clear whoever that was had a key. Nothing inside was broken, nothing missing. No signs of forced entry, just the quiet confirmation that someone had been coming and going whenever they wanted. Deputy H told me to change the locks immediately. Off the record, he leaned in and said something else. "Whoever's out in those woods," he said, "hasn't taken kindly to your granddad or you." That was enough for me. I drove straight to the local home improvement store and replaced every lock that same hour. New deadbolts, new handles, new everything. But changing locks doesn't change the feeling of being chosen. A few days later, I left the house entirely and went to stay with my parents out of state. Eventually, my dad handled the sale. We took what sentimental items we wanted. The rest was sold with the place or left behind. And of course, the listing didn't mention the decades-long whistling stalker with a key. To this day, I don't know how they got access. I don't know who they were. I don't know why my grandfather never pushed harder for answers. Maybe he was afraid of what he'd find. Maybe he knew more than he wrote. I don't believe in ghosts. I don't believe in hallucinations. I believe someone was living close enough to watch that house for years, waiting for it to hold a single occupant. I live in a city now. Noise, traffic, neighbors on every side. After that house, silence feels far more dangerous than sound. I'm 16 now and live in the city, but the first 8 years of my life were spent deep in the countryside. Looking back, it sounds almost unreal how much freedom we had. In that tiny village, barely 90 people total, kids roamed around like it was one big shared backyard. Everyone knew everyone. Not just names, but routines. Cars, too. Me and my friends could recognize vehicles by the sound of their engines, and we had half the license plates memorized. That's how small it was. That's how safe it felt. It was one of those scorching summer afternoons where the air barely moves and the sun feels personal. My friend, I'll call him Julian, and I had been outside for hours and we were dying for something cold. Specifically, Coca-Cola. Back then, soda was cheap at the little corner supermarket, but when you're 7 years old, even cheap feels expensive. We were short a few coins, just enough to make it frustrating. That's when an elderly woman from the village called out to us from her front yard. She told us her birthday was coming up and she planned to make fresh mint tea for guests. The problem was she'd run out of mint. She made us a deal. If we could fill 2 plastic bags with mint leaves, she'd buy us as much soda as we wanted. To 2 sweaty, sugar-craving kids who didn't want to beg their parents for money, that sounded like winning the lottery. So we got to work. We wandered through fields and along fences, digging through patches of green, hoping to find wild mint. The sun was brutal. It felt like it was frying our foreheads. Our shirts clung to us, damp and itchy. After what felt like hours, we'd barely filled half of 1 bag. Julian was getting irritated. I was too. The excitement of free soda had turned into stubborn determination. We didn't want to give up, but the light was starting to shift, and we knew we weren't going to meet our goal before evening. Still, we kept walking. We told ourselves we'd find some miracle patch, an entire cluster of mint just waiting for us. That's when they appeared. 2 tall guys approached us from the side of the road. And when I say tall, I mean probably around 5'7", but to us at 7 years old, they looked enormous, like grown men. They wore black hoodies despite the heat, dark tight pants, and heavy shoes. Their clothes felt wrong for the weather. Their faces didn't look old, maybe 16 or 17, but there was something hardened about their expressions. Not angry, just flat. What unsettled me most wasn't how they looked. It was how they spoke. Their voices were soft, almost playful, overly friendly in a way that felt rehearsed. They crouched slightly to seem less intimidating, smiling too wide. "Are you kids both alone?" One of them asked. In a light, childish tone, Julian stiffened beside me. I saw him glance at me quickly. His face had changed, his eyebrows slightly raised, lips tight. He subtly motioned with his hand, a small gesture that meant we should leave. But I didn't understand. Body language was never my strength. I just stood there, holding a half empty plastic bag of mint leaves, completely unaware that the safest place in the world had just started to feel very different. I turned my attention back to the two guys and, in the most cheerful voice I could manage, said, "Yeah, we're actually looking for mint plants. Do you know where we can find a lot of them? We've been searching forever and we're exhausted." I remember, almost like a quick flash in my head, one of them smirking when I said mint, not a big smile, just the corner of his mouth lifting for a second. At the time, I didn't understand it. Now, I replay that expression differently. One of them crouched down next to me and gently patted my head like I was a toddler. The gesture felt overly familiar. Julian reacted instantly. He stepped in and tugged my arm, pulling me slightly away from the guy's hand. His face had changed completely. No more sweaty frustration about soda. He looked tense, alert. "Who are your parents?" Julian asked them firmly. "Where I'm from, that question isn't random. In a village that's small, asking who someone's parents are really means, what family do you belong to? What bloodline?" There weren't many new families moving in, and everyone could trace each other back generations. If you couldn't answer that question properly, people noticed. Julian had grown up there his whole life. He knew every uncle, cousin, and distant relative in a 10-mile radius. I hadn't. So when he asked that, I think he was already afraid. He didn't recognize these two. And in a place where strangers practically didn't exist, that alone was a warning sign. The guys exchanged a quick glance. They didn't answer. Instead, their eyes shifted back to me. I suddenly felt like I was the focus of their attention, not both of us, just me. "Actually," one of them said smoothly, "we've seen a big field of mint. You see that hill over there? That's where we're coming from. If you want, we can take you there. Help you fill those bags. Maybe even more than that. We both knew that hill. It was our territory, Julie and me. And the other kids would sneak out at night to play hide and seek in the forest there. It felt adventurous and magical back then. But in all those years of running through that land, not once had I seen a mint field. The only crops around were corn, grapes, and sometimes watermelons. No wild mint paradise waiting over the hill. But I was 7, and 7-year-olds don't piece together red flags the way adults do. To me, they were just older boys offering help, and free soda was still the main goal. So I nodded eagerly and grabbed Julian's arm, pulling him forward as if he was the one being dramatic. "Come on," I said. The two guys looked satisfied, almost relieved, and started walking ahead of us. We followed. Step by step, we moved farther from the village. The houses grew smaller behind us until they disappeared entirely. The familiar dirt road turned narrower, quieter. I could feel Julian's hand trembling in mine now, not just sweaty shaking. That's when something shifted inside me. For the first time, I noticed how far we'd gone. I turned slightly, expecting to still see rooftops or fences in the distance. Nothing. The village was completely out of sight. Ahead of us stood the forest at the base of the hill, thick, dark, and silent. And even from where I stood, I could tell something very simply. There was no field of mint waiting there. I tried asking them again where exactly we were going, but their answers stayed frustratingly vague. "You'll see, just be patient." They kept smiling when they said it, like this was some kind of fun surprise. By then, the heat wasn't what was making me sweat. My steps started slowing on their own. My stomach felt tight, like something cold had settled inside it. Panic began creeping up my spine, but the strangest part was this: even though every instinct was starting to scream, I couldn't stop walking. It felt like we were already too deep in. Like, if we suddenly turned around, something in them would snap. I had this overwhelming certainty that if either of us tried to step back too early, something really, really bad would happen. Then Julian leaned closer to me, so close I could feel his breath against my ear. I can still hear his whisper perfectly, even years later. "There's something wrong with these two. Run." That was it. The very next second, Julian bolted downhill, dragging me with him. His hand clamped around mine so tightly it almost hurt, but he didn't let go, not even for a fraction of a second. I didn't argue. I didn't look back at first. I just ran. I ran like my life depended on it, and honestly, it probably did. Behind us, I heard the guys shout something angry now. No more soft, childish voices. I heard them curse, and then I heard footsteps pounding against dirt. They were chasing us. That sound is burned into my memory. I started crying instantly, the kind of crying where you can't control the noise. My chest hurt. I don't even remember breathing properly. I just remember the hill being uneven, rocks, and loose dirt under my shoes. One wrong step and I could have fallen. Running downhill that fast was dangerous. I could have broken an ankle, hit my head. But fear does something strange to the body. It pushes you past what you think you're capable of. We ran almost 2 kilometers back toward the village without stopping. I still don't understand how. My legs should have given out. My lungs should have collapsed. But adrenaline carried us the entire way. At some point, when the rooftops of the village finally came into view, I risked a glance behind us. They were gone. I don't know when they stopped chasing us. Maybe they didn't want to risk being seen near the houses. Maybe they realized we were too close to people. The old woman who had promised us soda saw us first. We must have looked horrifying, faces pale, soaked in sweat, tears streaming down our cheeks like we'd seen a ghost. She rushed toward us and quickly ushered us inside her house. She gave us chocolate and water, speaking in a calm voice like she was trying not to scare us more. She asked what happened. Julian told her everything. I couldn't speak. My mouth felt completely paralyzed, like my brain had shut off my ability to form words. When he finished, the woman's expression changed. She looked genuinely shaken. Then she scolded us for being so reckless. Well, she scolded Julian. He lied. He told her that I didn't want to follow them, that he was the one who insisted it was fine. He took the blame. Because of that, he wasn't allowed outside for a month. I, on the other hand, wasn't grounded, but I carried something heavier than punishment. For weeks, I couldn't sleep properly. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw black hoodies at the edge of a field. I heard that fake, friendly voice asking if we were alone. We never found out who they were. No one in the village recognized them. No new families had moved in. It was like they had appeared out of thin air and disappeared the same way. Now that I'm older, I can make a very educated guess about what they wanted, and that realization makes my stomach turn. While we were running, there was a huge chance I could have tripped. One fall would have been enough. If Julian had let go of my hand for even a second, I don't know what would have happened. Julian is my boyfriend now. Sometimes we talk about that day, and he admits he was terrified the moment they avoided his question about their parents. He knew something was wrong before I did. If it weren't for him grabbing my hand and telling me to run, I genuinely don't want to imagine how that story would have ended.